Welcome to DMV Spotlight here in the nation's capital, where we shine a light on the issues impacting D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. I'm Barbara Britt. Well, Veterans Day is over for this year, and the parades are over as well, but many veterans continue to struggle as they leave the military and come back into civilian life, struggling in different ways. And my guest this morning is John Way. He is the president of VA Way and has a deep personal history with veterans. And I want to thank you so much for joining me today on DMV Spotlight.
Thank you, Barbara. Nice to be here.
Thank you. So, John, talk to us about, let's start with your own experience after some time in the Army and then coming back into civilian life. What was that like for you?
It was difficult, and back then you just thought that was the normal, So I didn't assimilate well. I had to pivot and go different directions because I didn't have much guidance. That was several years ago, and things have changed dramatically over the last 10 years. And then I owned a business, and I decided to strictly hire veterans because they needed that hand up instead of a handout. And so owning a Jiffy Lube, I only hired veterans. And I saw that it was making a difference in their lives, being able to have gainful employment. I was also hiring the homeless veterans. We were hiring the veterans where the VA deemed them maybe unhireable due to mental health challenges or other physical challenges. But I saw a way around that and led the way in hiring veterans at a small business.
That's amazing. And I just want to go back to what you said about, obviously we have heard and we've learned over the years that so many of the homeless people that we see in Washington and in the Washington area are veterans, which is so heartbreaking. But explain to people how that happens.
Well, it's kind of a tragedy and amazing all at once. I actually witnessed a veteran become homeless. You wonder why they can't go home. Well, it's because one of the leading things that indicates someone has a mental health challenges is to have successful relationships, okay? And so you go back to your family, you have all these demons and things. You're not going to have a successful relationship with anyone, let alone your family, because your family's probably going to see you at your worst, So, but I witnessed a veteran, be evicted from his apartment. We were there to help him as he transitioned from being in a place to homeless. So I've seen the impact, and it takes a huge toll on somebody, a veteran, who once was, so proud and capable and able to do many things. Now he's just trying to figure out where to live. And with my business that I had at the time, with my network, I was able to assist that veteran to have a very short homeless period. But there's veterans out there. I've hired veterans that were homeless for 2 years. It's life changing, and the only way I was able to understand what it took to hire these veterans was getting trained in something called mental health first aid for veterans.
And that really it transitioned you yourself as well, because you're the president of VA Way, and that is an organization that helps veterans, and it focuses on their mental health, and that brings us to this mental health first aid. Tell us about mental health first aid. We hear so much now about mental health.
Right. Well, mental health first aid is a training course. You learn how to basically respond like with CPR to somebody having a heart attack. This teaches you the skills to help somebody who's having a mental health crisis or substance use crisis. Personally, this training changed and saved my life, because it's what helped. You go to take a class to learn to help other people, and the sneaky part is this class teaches you how to help yourself because it gives you those tools so you shatter your own stigmas and you realize, I have depression, I have anxiety, there's nothing wrong with me. But without this training, I wouldn't be here today, and once I saw what the training did for my employees and it increased everything, I decided to become a mental health first aid instructor for veterans, and we teach the mental health first aid to, veterans or non-veterans, but a lot of things with in-person training took a curve with COVID, of course.
And then how does that work? I mean, how do you get connected? I know you said with your business you would hire veterans, and at this point, do veterans find you, or how does that work?
Well, at this point, I'm different, part in the growth of our organization. We can go to vaway.org and, connect with us, and we're trying to get the classes going again. We do in-person trainings where we can do groups of 5 up to 25. This training is invaluable these days, considering what everybody's been dealing with. So it's also available in the local health departments in a lot of communities.
And I know that you work within your community as well. Talk to us about what mental health IQ is, because you mentioned that at the VA Way. I'm speaking today with John Way. He's the president of VA Way. And so tell us about mental health IQ.
Well, what's really helpful is everybody, learn about, what mental health is. It's come a long way. It's like having a veteran talk about what the symptoms and side effects are of PTSD. It's, educating them, raising their mental health IQ of realizing hey, I'm having a panic attack. Prior to the training, they would just have the panic attack and who knows what could happen. But, I've experienced personally, since I've been trained since 2015, is I recognize when I'm struggling with depression. And it's, again, if I had not had this training, I don't think I'd be here today, because there's like every veteran, we have some dark times and hard times in our lives, and we just don't know if we're going to make it through. And with 22 veterans a day or even higher, completing suicide is a tragic loss. And I feel that if more people were trained and to see the signs and symptoms of those struggling, you can head this off, because at the end of the day, the training is to prevent suicide or harm to a person, that you're close to.
So if you are trained is the idea to get all veterans trained in this so they can recognize that in themselves, or to come alongside a veteran, or both?
It's actually kind of all the above, both. When I sent my Jiffy Lube employees to get trained in mental health first aid, if I told them I was sending them to a self-help course, they wouldn't take it. But if they're taking a course to go help other veterans, they were all in. So it's really, the training is not only just for veterans, but for non-veterans, because if you're in the workplace and you recognize the signs and symptoms of your coworker, you might be the first line of defense to help that person out. But without being trained to know the signs and symptoms of, depression, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, anxiety, all those things play a role, and 1 in 4 of us, probably 1 in 3 of us these days is struggling with some type of short-term or long-term mental health challenge that may be diagnosed or undiagnosed.
It's such a good point, John. I'm speaking today with John Way, the president of VA Way, helping veterans with their mental health IQ, their mental health first aid. And John, once people get trained, is that also then a tool? Is it diagnosis, or is it then also tools on how to move forward? What is that next step then?
Well, once you get trained to be a mental health first aider, you always have the action plan of what to do. Okay, so you assess the person, you listen non-judgmentally, you give them reassurance. Okay, you encourage self-help, and then you encourage professional help. So it gives you the tools to help somebody navigate a low point in their life. Maybe they're having substance use challenges. With sitting on so many of the boards in Howard County, substance use, overdoses, all those things are everywhere these days. And so the more people that get trained, the better the community is. And for my work, when I had half the employees trained in mental health first aid, that's when I saw the difference. And it wasn't instant, but probably over the next, 3 to 6 months, the whole culture changed. Everything started to increase. Turnover went down. I mean, veterans were understanding what it took to work with somebody with PTSD or depression, or they're having a panic attack. So the skills are invaluable, and they can be used for the life. I mean, 70% of the people over the last 10 years trained in mental health first aid have used those skills to help others. I mean, I have personally helped people not to choose suicide, because I was able to, communicate with them and get them the help they needed. To me, it's like this training, becoming an instructor, was all I ever wanted to do once I saw how it impacted my life and others' lives.
And do you see an application, John, beyond our veterans for, as we know, coming out of the pandemic, our young people, so many people who were isolated, so many struggles that people had, fearful, people have lost people, isolated from people they love. Do you see a larger application for the mental health first aid as well?
Absolutely. What's really nice about mental health first aid, we can teach it to anybody, okay? And there's different modules. There's the veteran module is one that I specialize in. I also specialize in first responders and senior citizens. There is versions for higher learning, which are college-age kids. There's even teen versions of this. The sooner you get somebody trained in this, the more it's going to help their life from that point on. And we try to encourage, I practice gravy, every day for our employees and our teams. Is every day you have to have, gravy. It's gratitude, a good routine of self-care, awareness of where you're at mentally, and those are mentally around you. Vulnerability, recognizing when someone's being vulnerable and know how to be vulnerable yourself. And then why is you can be the difference every day, not only in your own life, but others' lives by just getting trained in mental health first aid. This training needs to be mandatory, in my opinion. You're going to use it more than CPR.
And where can people, if they're listening and maybe they're not a veteran, maybe they are a veteran, they know a veteran, or maybe they're not a veteran, they're like, I want more information, I want to be able to get this first aid training for mental health.
Well, like I said, mental health first aid training is not, it's been around for 10 years, more than 10 years in the Maryland area. So it's available at some health departments and churches. Again, you go to VAWay.org and message us. And, we can try to get you set up with a class or in a class. A lot of the training has changed, and new modules are now coming out because of the pandemic. Everything, has shifted. Prior to the pandemic, I'm out here talking about mental health first aid. People were like, what's that? And now it's like, where do I get that? How do I get that? And, we're just starting to get back into real in-person training in 2023.
So exciting. I've been speaking today with John Way. He is the president of VA Way and helps other veterans with their mental health IQ, with mental health first aid, with peer support groups. And I just want to thank you so much for joining me today on DMV Spotlight.
Well, thank you, Barbara. It's a pleasure being here.
I'm Barbara Britt, and join us again next week at this same time for DMV Spotlight.